everyone. Excited to have a productive conversation this afternoon about AI. For us, this session is track 1. We're talking about market advantage and signal intelligence. We'll get started by introducing our panelists. I'll allow you both to introduce yourself. Dan, you want to start first?
Sure. Dan Garcia, I'm the head of Insights and Analytics at GSK. I always hate looking back at the years. About 25 years between, I started as a biostatistician, but between payer, provider, pharma, sales, just a lot of different spots. So
awesome.
It's a great perspective. It's been really fun to see different pieces of it.
Yeah.
And Preeti?
Yeah, I'm Preeti Ravalia. I'm head of Data Operations, Insights, and Analytics at Day One Biopharmaceuticals out in San Francisco. And I'm a serial small biotech builder. And so I'm super excited to be here to share a lot of our learnings and failures as well.
Yeah, awesome. Really excited, different perspectives in industry. I think we'll have a really productive discussion. So kicking it off, let's start with the patient first. A big theme as we've unpacked each session today. I'm going to start with you, Dan. How are your teams leveraging AI to identify patients earlier in their diagnostic journeys?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. And honestly, I was thinking, even as I was hearing Alex and everyone else speaking, like it's our biggest challenge by far is almost like untraining people. And I'll get to your question. Like it's untraining people on like why we're using it. And we're just starting, right? We're using it in the places I think probably most people are, which is right like within the sales force, places that are a little bit more, I guess you can say safe. However, we're quickly starting to expand into other areas, anywhere from market research to just more general analytics.
Awesome. And Preeti, how about you?
Yeah, utilizing AI to find patients is our bread and butter. I work in rare disease, pediatric population, which are, typically and most predominantly the underrepresented patient populations and segments in syndicated data. And so we just don't see patients in our data sets. And I've had a lot of conversations with Chad about, how do we model the patients we know that are out there that we just can't see. And so we utilize AI to enable treatment decision, sort of pattern recognition, patient finding, prescriber breadth identification and depth. And most recently, we're utilizing AI to help us understand which of our current patients on therapy are most likely to discontinue, right? Because it's so much it's a lot easier to keep a patient on therapy once you've made the effort to get them on, right? And so persistency is a big area ripe for AI adoption.
Oh, absolutely. Dan, how do you feel like, in terms of identifying patients, what's the next step to greater visibility across, your specific remit within GSK?
Yeah, look, to me, the next step, and we're doing a lot of the same. It's great to hear. Like it's how do we integrate it more? Look, I think every place has probably done a great job at creating information. It's like how do you start creating better action and connectedness? Yeah. And so to me, when you're saying the patient piece, it's how do we really connect it so that it's not an action like someone has to read something and take an action, and someone else has to read something. Like how do we get connected within the providers? Yeah. And obviously this is really challenging stuff, right? Like the providers, the payers, so that we take the full value of AI.
Yeah, awesome. Let's talk a little bit about clinical nuance. Why are healthcare native AI models built specifically for life sciences more effective at identifying genuine therapy shifts than a generic model that's simply aggregating medical codes like ICD codes? Preeti, you want to start?
Yeah, a great example of this that we've talked about a lot is seasonality, right? It's something that we all, as experts in life sciences, manufacturing, understand. There's a cycle in terms of, patient flow. Patients are getting MRI scans every 3 months, and that's a natural pattern that we just innately sort of assume. And the AI needs to sort of know that as well, right? Off-the-shelf sort of agent may not have that context and understand that health insurance plans reset in January, right? Some basic sort of fundamentals that we just take for granted. we need to ensure that our agents also have that understanding, right? And so you're that much more powerful, right, with the context and access to something like the healthcare map, right, gives your AI a lot more power. And so for us, that's been extremely critical and important in making sure that the tools that we disseminate into the organization make sense for our teams. And so you have to have that context.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that discussion that we had, that we could sit within front of a model and we could acknowledge with a pediatric indication that seasonality trends also account for like summer break.
Right.
You think it can do that? And I was
Yeah.
like, I don't know, I've never tried. And
Right.
we tried it, and it was amazing that it was more confirming a hypothesis than anything else. And then
Absolutely.
what decision was next then became much more powerful. in terms of how
Yeah.
you're saying that.
So I mean, look, we had I recently talked to someone about this, and I'm like, would you have your physician build your house? No, right? Obviously not.
Yeah.
Of course.
We just recently, actually last week, we were working on one of these agents, and we were running like ATUs through it. It wasn't specifically ATUs. It was like we do regular kind of like pulses with HCPs, and we ran it through, and it did pretty good.
Yeah.
And then I remember we had this idea. We essentially literally said, well, walk me through, recorded it, walk me through and tell me what it should have done. And then we fed it back in. And then we had it explain the next time what was happening.
Yeah.
And it was magic, right? And they were like, how in the world did you do that? But it's like just giving it that context changed that one agent's like entire.
We were just talking about how much the industry is changing, and if you apply that to more of a, an analog approach to analytics, could you imagine working with, an analyst that within your team or third party, and then saying, we're able to iterate again, and be also scrutinize. Like, I don't really like what it said. Like, what do I need to change
100%.
and do it in real time? Yeah.
That's actually, it's funny you say that. That probably has been the biggest value and perception change. Like the biggest change for even how I work with them is actually, it sounds absolutely terrifying, but like fighting back with it and becoming, almost getting into like this really big debate with it, and it's actually produced some of the best responses back.
That's awesome. So let's talk about care gaps. In a high-stake therapeutic area, like one within oncology or rare disease, how can AI help you flag care gaps before this becomes a permanent hurdle for a patient outcome? Dan? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not in oncology, it's obviously, but like I don't think there's a single person in the room that hasn't been touched by someone, right? So I mean, probably like 10 years ago, I had my grandfather pass from pancreatic. I think when you look at the way we've been running pharma, we've always looked at the endpoint. Like we look for the ICD-10 codes that we're looking for. We're not looking for like the underlying signals. Most of the time, these things are underdiagnosed. I think what it's going to change, and this is what I meant, like there's a big piece of change management we're going to have to get to. Like we're going to have to stop almost looking for that one thing we're looking for, and then let these signals underneath start kind of not predicting or like hinting the things that might be happening, which it sounds like you're doing some of that now.
Yeah.
Like to infuse missing data, which you have to do in rare disease.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's gaps galore, right? I mean, and that's something that we just have to accept and have to work with. I mean, in our space, in oncology, there's a lot of watching and waiting, right? And that's a dynamic that we have to make assumptions around, right? Is it truly a patient and a physician is waiting to make a treatment decision, or do we just not have visibility to it, right? And have we missed that treatment window? And so we talk about things in the context of treatment windows, treatment decisions, because that's when we have time to action.
Yeah.
It's too late if we've already seen the scan sort of clinical encounter, or it's too late if we've already seen even the first line therapy come through, right? And so for us, we're utilizing, patient cohorts to, sort of reinvent the way that we approach data. We're not looking for ICD-10 codes anymore. We're looking for patients themselves, right, that look a certain way. And we've gone through the exercise that I'm sure many of you have in terms of tokenizing your own SP data and then looking back in the, claims data to see which of the patients did we miss, which of these patients didn't have an ICD-10 code that we thought they should have. And so we're sort of flipping it now, where we're looking for patients as opposed to codes, right? Because there's so many gaps even in the outpatient sort of oral oncolytic setting.
Yeah, we'll lean into that a bit more with the next question. So we know that traditional data can sometimes be slow to show when a patient leaves therapy. How does AI-driven detection help you spot like a competitive displacement in near real time? And Preeti, why don't you pick that up? I think it'll...
Yeah, I mean, again, the treatment window, right? The treatment decision sort of algorithm is what we rely on. And then we action and signal on that to our field teams, what's in it for them, right? We're surfacing physicians and opportunities and time periods that make sense for the teams to go out and interact and engage with the physician. And we marry all of that together with our own internal tactic data. So, are they opening our email content? Are they receptive at this time to an individual from our organization coming in and checking in, right? So we look at everything in the context of a treatment window, and is there an opportunity for us to influence that window, and whether we see sort of competitive products being used in that treatment window or not. We're building our workflows sort of around the algorithm that we've created internally.
Dan, for you in specialty.
Yeah, look, it sounds like we're doing a lot of the same. I think the challenge, at least I've kind of turned my eyes to, is like how we're creating all this information, we're creating all this insight, we're even identifying, right? So even if you look at asthma, like severe asthma, like they're still underdiagnosed, and the same concepts can be made, except you're hitting 1 million patients instead of 4,000. But it's like getting it to be meaningful to the person who needs to be taking an action on it. I mean, for so long, especially when you think of the field or even the MSLs, our medical team, they're looking for an endpoint. Like if I'm a rep, when you're in the field, it's like I'm gonna go talk to Chad. Chad wrote 20 scripts, so clearly I'm gonna go talk to Chad because he wrote 20 scripts last time. Instead of there's these signals that our patients are gonna be walking in, and I need to be talking to this physician because this is about to happen. It's a big change, and to me that's the biggest part we're trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out.
How much do you think AI-ready data really helps empower that type of decision velocity?
I was having this chat in the back today. So I literally have a slide probably 17 times over, which some of you might have, which is like when you're doing modeling. So I'm a mathematician underneath. Like it's like 80% data, 20% modeling, right? It's kind of what we used to say, and I'd almost argue, look, I love what Alex said. The short term. I'm talking right in the near term. I think it's 99% data now, right? And like 1% AI today. But and the AI piece is huge, right? Like the impact it can have, but we have to get the data right, which it's a big change for an org, right? Like for how many years or decades have we been having chats of like, we spend all this money on data, like don't we have enough? And now it's turned into, do we? Like could we be doing more? How much can we be feeding it? Because we're talking about creating I'll call them little androids. We're talking about creating little agents to go out and do things with us not potentially being in the loop sometimes, right? And so why would you stop feeding it?
Yeah. Preeti, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at this critical inflection point where it's less about sort of the standard organization, aggregation, standardization efforts that you typically have to do to make sense of all of the various data sources. But I do think that rigor is important to make sure that we are getting the sort of valuable outputs that we need at this sort of early stage of AI adoption, right? Because people are a little bit more, or still skeptical of the outputs. And so we've spent a lot of time at our organization doing that foundational layer, data cleansing, organizational effort to ensure that the pilots that we pick to apply AI are successful. Yeah. And so, and I think that will evolve because eventually I think that organization and cleansing piece will be done by an AI agent, right? More readily. So it's an interesting shift.
But I think you nailed one thing. Like there's a lot of skepticism, but I want to make sure like folks don't miss this piece. Like you attached it to value. I think there's a lot of, I mean, even in my org, we could have 100 people running around with toys and trying to build like this really, listen, I'm all for it, building this great academic solution that doesn't get tied to value.
Right, yeah.
And like folks don't realize we're almost like looking for our own VC funding within our own organization. And the best way to do that is to make connected to value,
yeah.
right? Directly connected to value. So I think skeptics if someone's skeptic, they haven't connected it yet to something valuable.
Well, let's lean into the organizational dynamic just a bit more, right? So when a new treatment barrier or delay emerges in the market, is the organization equipped to pivot immediately, to take advantage of strategic agility, like a signal in real time? Or are you finding that you're still kind of beholden to like a quarterly review cycle, right? Like how well is the organization adapting to more repeatable, more real-time insight? And Dan, why don't you start that?
No. I mean, seriously, right? Like it's the hardest thing on AI, I think, is the piece that I think we're all trying to navigate, which is the change management component. I think, look, organizations, teams, individuals who are coming up with projects, they severely underweight how much time, I would say 80, putting data aside for a minute, the next time suck appropriately is change management. Like understanding, like telling people what they're gonna get, what should they expect, what it's used for, understanding like this, how connected it has to be. Like if what I deliver at the end of the day requires me to leave my normal routine and go hunt down this insight, it's useless. Like understanding that flow and like having the organization bought in, we haven't even cracked that nut yet. It's a hard one. I mean, it's the one I struggle with all the time.
Yeah.
What about for you?
Yeah, I think this sort of the change management absolutely is a sort of critical piece, and the embedding it into existing workflows is critical to get that adoption. I would say we're lucky in the sense that we're a small organization, so there's a lot less sort of stream selling that we have to do, and we're not yet at the phase of, we gave you this money for AI, now a year later I'm going to ask you to cut your budget, right? Which I think a lot of organizations are potentially facing. So we're certainly still beholden to our QBRs, our MPRs, our monthly performance reviews, and our weekly refresh of our reports. But we are able to pivot quickly in the specific use cases that we've chosen to embed AI into the workflow. For instance, who are the tail end prescribers that have not yet written that we do strongly believe could write, right? This tail of physicians in our market is continuously sort of the area where we need to get growth and adoption. And so we've been able to embed that in our weekly, alerts to our field team members, and that's been a win. And so I would say we're on the early stages, as you said, in terms of really getting the organization to pivot quickly. But QBRs aren't going anywhere, right? Like MPRs aren't going anywhere, and that process, it's going to take some time for people to be comfortable with getting insights sort of embedded everywhere, as opposed to having this sort of monthly discussion about it.
Yeah, but I mean, it's funny how much time you spend there, and it's all retrospective.
Yes.
It's kind of happened already, and we worry about it, and we spend, I don't even know how much time on it, versus like we're talking about embedding things to actually make a change up front and spot it. Yeah. So it's where that's what I'm saying. The change management component is everything. So I think even when you said it, we're not very different. You're talking about not edge cases, but you're talking about cases. It's like, how do you embed it in the middle of things and have it be a source, right? Like even today, like we're embedding it into commercial, and then we could have medical doing their own thing, and it's like we're talking about the same patients, right? And it's like, how do we embed it in the middle and make it the foundation? And that's why I'm saying I think the hardest challenge is that. It's the change management. It's changing the perception of an organization for insights analytics and looking at them as a cost center versus looking at them as like revenue generating if you're on the commercial side, right? And like medical insight generating if you're on the medical side. Like it's a tough like I think it's an important challenge we have in front of us, but that's the one that I think we're going to struggle with.
Yeah. You paint this picture, Dan, of like all these agents going out, almost working autonomously and all to a unique endpoint and the value it brings to your organization. But I think we're still very much at a point where we need a human in the loop, right? And humans obviously involved in the change management component, but acknowledging that like institutional knowledge across your entire organization is extremely valuable. And then you have now this solution coming in, and like how can we use that to, make better decisions, have a singular source of truth on how you see your brand or how you see your patient. And so with that, as technology scales and we start to incorporate more of that human knowledge into a system that's aligned to your business, if key talent leaves and their gut feeling goes with them, how does codifying the business rules and the institutional knowledge into an AI agent help maintain consistent long-term strategy for your teams and organizations?
So it's funny, you can look at this two ways. I just gave you the example of the whole Pulse or the ATU. Like, the first time we saw this agent in action, the first thing that one of my team said was like, that's absolutely terrifying. Like, it's that point of where we're not necessary isn't far along. I really do think that's the wrong way of looking at it. And I truly mean this. Like, yes, there's the value of when someone leaves, how great would it be if I can take that person and have them there, right? So that it stays, because as leaders, we want our folks getting developed and moving on to the next role. But like, forget that for a minute. Like, how great would it be if I can take these people who have great institutional insight, great external market insight, and instead of spending all this time building like an insight deck or consuming a 500 HCP survey, they're actually thinking through what it means and what to do with it. So I think it's the wrong way of looking at it. But yeah, I mean, someone leaving and having that ability, like it's so valuable once those agents are doing what they should do.
Yeah, the point you made, we're going to come back to in the next question, but pretty for you, institutional knowledge, the human component, but being able to incorporate that into a workflow that remains, long-term strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think on from a build perspective, right? And I'm talking about this very sort of tactically. When we're building like a system, how great is it that we don't have to document a lot of this stuff anymore, right? I mean, this is the kind of stuff that nobody likes doing.
It's so good at it.
Yeah, and it's so good at it. And so I think viewing it in that lens of just like, this is the low effort work, and I think we heard this, all this morning in a lot of these talks, is the kind of effort that you can offload onto, these AI agents is the stuff that you don't even want your people to be.
That's right. You don't want to do it at all.
Yeah, and
right.
So I look at it as sort of a positive in that front, and now we spend way less time in our sprints documenting and doing a postmortem because it's all built into our workflows, like the documentation, and it takes 30 minutes as opposed to like a full day, right? So yeah, it's really changed the speed at which we can do things, and has improved just the kinds of effort that our team spends their time on.
It's actually the coolest thing, and you only have that one moment when someone hasn't seen it yet, where they don't know what an agent does, and they see this amazing documentation that you did nothing to create, by the way, and they're like, "You wrote this? This is amazing."
Yeah.
And you're like, "No, I didn't."
No, I
this."
didn't. Yeah.
No. But so I was on the clinical side, and so if you think of like the statistical analysis plan or the protocols or any of that, like, I mean, I remember having binders. I'm going back to the 90s now. I remember having binders on my desk and like reading through stuff and writing it, and you're just like falling asleep writing it. Yeah. I mean, it is amazing, and it's just, you're taking that energy, which it is. Look, we have 24 hours. That's the one consistent thing we all have. We have 24 hours in a day, each of us. And it's like you're now taking it and you're saying, I'm going to have 7 more hours to do something else, and what can it be? And I think that's just the way we should be looking at it. But yeah, the documentation is amazing. It's amazing. For sure.
We call it the whoa moment.
Yeah.
Where you're like, that is.
You only get it once.
I remember when we were working together actually, and had this conversation about seasonality. It's like, it's an interesting dynamic, and like, I could go and research it for hours or days.
Yeah.
Even. But being able to just take a transcript and incorporate that into a prompt, and then automatically be getting feedback that's enlightening, and then hypothesis testing on top of that is definitely a whoa moment, where otherwise, what is the slog?
So we had a real neat one recently too. So imagine 2 agents, and look, I'm gonna paint a picture of what could be, but it's like we had this happen, and we have 2 agents, each of them doing their own thing. Great. You have another agent sitting on top of it who's now interpreting and looking for correlations, and it's funny, we missed something and we were like, oh, this study over here and this study over here. And it gave an insight and I'm like, I didn't even see that. And it was really, really neat. So I mean, it is, again, and look, the same question came up. I'm going back to the physician building the house.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, how did you get it to do that? It's like, we trained it.
Yeah.
And it's gotten better and better and better.
Yeah, that engineering process is.
It takes time,
Yeah.
and you have to have folks. Look, the thing that's really important is it's like all of us, it's like the knowledge we have that it doesn't have of like bringing in, understanding like for this therapeutic area, these kind of things mean something and these things don't. And, yeah, it's invaluable.
Yeah, we'll lean into that a bit. I think that your comment on institutional knowledge, right? I mean, at the end of the day, like to be able to have that in a usable format that helps inform decisions, like is invaluable, right? But if we step a little bit more to the human component, and we're talking about like efficiencies, if you have that system set up and you're operating in an automated AI framework, and you can reclaim 90% of the time that your team spends currently on data engineering or cleaning or more manual reporting and analytic, and then you could redirect that strategic brain power to more strategic initiatives, not just answering and responding to requests, but asking better questions, right?
Yeah.
How would that impact, short-term, mid-term, long-term opportunities for you and your organization?
I give you the generic answer everyone would give you, right? It's like, oh, it opened up all this time. But I mean, like, really thinking about it, like, where do we spend most of our time? In the creation piece and the validation piece, and then in probably the presentation piece. We never really sit there and think through. We just don't have the time, especially if the longer you've been over the last 20 years. I can tell you the amount of time I can spend on any one thing just keeps going down because each of us are getting more. And it's like, I would wonder if like I would tackle questions. I mean, I have. Like when I've had more time, would I tackle questions differently? Would I start from scratch potentially because someone brings up a great question, and before I'm like actually would say we don't have time for that, and now I'm saying let's stick it into the multi-agent and see what comes out of it, and then maybe it is worth our effort. I think it would open us up to obviously have more time to work on things, but it might completely change the course of action we were going to take.
Yeah. How about you?
Yeah. I mean, a great example for our team is just the budgeting cycle, right? Everybody's question is, well, on the marketing side, how much more should we invest in X, Y, and Z, right? Those strategic decisions, the amount of effort that it takes to even get the data together, the analysis together to start having that conversation is enormous, the ROI analysis, right? And so with our, our LLM models now, we have that data ready to go, and we can scenario plan, model on the fly, and it's made that process so much more efficient and strategic as opposed to just like, okay, this is what we did, last quarter, last year, and okay, and now I'm gonna have to come back to you, tomorrow with the updated iteration, right? So it's made, it's freed up our team's time to really have those more strategic discussions as opposed to, again, just tossing over the analysis over the fence and then waiting for the questions to come, right? Like we're already doing that pressure testing, scenario planning before we're walking into that meeting.
I'd still argue though, like you're always gonna have to have human in the loop or maybe human outside of the loop. Like even in the one you're giving, and we're in a lot of the same spots, it's like we're using it as tools to accelerate us. I really do think we gotta start pushing this idea. Like, look, we never wanna do it where someone can get harmed, obviously, right? Yeah. But like, pushing we got to start becoming better at being willing to fail and be wrong and then quickly iterate and change. Like I might want to change human in the loop. Like how can you take market mix to actually make a recommendation and buy advertisement time without you being in the middle of it and redeploying? If we don't start trying to push to that, not just the insight piece, but the actual decision making and maybe human outside of the loop watching it kind of thing.
I love that. Arv spoke earlier about like kill something that's fine.
Yeah.
Right? And if you think about from a
fine.
manual perspective, you have something, you build something, you work with your team, and you stand it up and you get feedback, and they're like, well, this is good. Now, how difficult is it now to go from good to great, right? If you were to do it in the way that we've all been used to doing it. Like, how do you feel like AI technology and the access to the underlying data has allowed your teams to move from good to great? And what type of impact does that have on your business?
Yeah, I mean, it's really caused us to question a lot of like, again, the typical sort of, okay, these are the operational things that we accept as, the day-to-day overhead of managing sort of a team, right? And we're challenging the team to really look at all of our infrastructure and figure out, okay, this is working, right? But we know it can be better and we know it can be faster. And so it is that uncomfortable, squeeze, shift, change. But I mean, there's so much of what we do day to day that we just do because it's working, and we are a little, risk averse, right? It's a lot harder to say, I'm going to take the time and challenge this, and we are starting to do that, and it's uncomfortable. And it's interesting because we study HCP adoption curves day in and day out, right? You have your folks that are going to adopt really early, and you have your folks that are never going to adopt. I see the same thing on my team, right? There's team members that are ready to, be a part of the change. And again, we heard this morning, and then there's team members that are very reticent and scared and don't want to be a part of the change. And, there's only one way that this is going to end, right? And so it's a tough situation to be in as a leader, but we're all sort of working together to sort of get to that North Star.
Look, I actually think if we used to kill 5 things out of 10, we probably have to kill 8 out of 10 now.
Yeah.
Because we're probably producing 100. And that's okay. We should be pushing. I would argue we should push the boundaries as hard as we can, right? Like the things that's what I've seen with this. And I have a couple people on my team that were here who have heard me say this. Like it's like we think we understand, at least from what I've seen over the last, let's say year, because I feel like we've done a lot in the last year. Like we think we understand what good looks like until we push it a little bit more. And my old team members would say, like, Dan's about to sell the dream. And before it kind of was, like, if you've been in sales on the vendor side, it's like, oh, they're selling vapor right now. But it's like we got to keep pushing, because what we think is good might not even be the beginning of it. I can tell you we've had a few of those moments over the last 6 months that I did not think they were possible. Yeah. So, but that also means that maybe some things have to die.
Yeah. I think if we were to take a step back and think about that adoption that both of you mentioned, right? Certainly adoption across your team, but as the organization also looks at broader scale and adoption, talking about the why behind AI. So strategic leaders won't act on bold decisions if they don't trust a black box. It's a big thing for us: trust, transparency, auditability. How critical for you is the explainability, is the auditable reasoning to leadership and ultimately to your strategic AI initiatives moving forward?
Yeah.
Preeti, you want to start with that?
Yeah. I mean, we heard this loud and clear this morning as well, right? Trust is everything, and that transparency, but it's also making it accessible, right? Putting it in the right place, and making it part of the workflow. I think we stated this earlier. It has to be visible, sort of transparent, and path of least resistance, right? It has to be part of my day-to-day workflow. And so we focus a lot on making sure that we have the executive sponsor, right? We have the legal compliance, all of those folks sort of in the room when we are, starting a larger initiative, and making sure that we have the right, level of transparency that we need, and the visibility to business rules, outputs. How are we going to have the human in the loop? How are we going to verify sort of the outputs? And so, I think transparency is key in its most sort of obvious way, right?
Yeah.
Being able to truly trace back how we're arriving at certain decisions and how we're evolving from the original sort of.
So being very intentional about the audit.
Absolutely, yeah.
Dan?
However. Look, I think every company has been really comfortable in doing it in some spots, right? Can I identify a patient? Can I identify an HCP? As we start pushing into other areas, should I buy an asset? It starts becoming more difficult. Explainability will only get there so far. In other words, we will never be able to fully break down these deep neural nets. Maybe we will, right? So I think there's this balance of if we're not giving a loan, let's say, and potentially the AI is creating some kind of situation that it shouldn't do, but like if it's something that doesn't potentially have like those legal constraints, and you're saying like, should we buy an asset? If we built an AI that picked an asset 97% of the time accurately, and we can't break down every feature of what it's doing, like that's why. So when I'm thinking of it, it's like you have to define what trust is. Like, you have to know every variable it went in, like in the old modeling days, if you were building like some form of MMX, right, like some form of mixed model, and you're like, this parameter is this parameter is that, or is it has this guiding principle with these guardrails and it has this outcome, this target, this outcome that happens 90-something% of the time. I think that's part of the whole change management up front. Like, what are your goals? How willing are you to let go? Again, there's a place for it, right? Like, we can't let it completely go on deciding who gets loans, or, right? Like, things like that.
But possibly just more validation for the human in the loop concept. I mean, for me, like non-data scientist, non-clinician, hack analyst at best, but the opportunity to use AI and support our clients across industry and generate very compelling insights that, I think are, valuable in, how we bring therapy to patients. I still phone a friend, right? Like, because at the end of the day, it's like if we're making a decision or we're sharing a message on how do we bring value through to patients ultimately getting better, the human in the loop is ever present, more and more so. And to that point as well, I think for you, when you're talking about bigger decisions, it's like that whole trust dynamic is then changing again, right? We're not just like looking at a better way to do an old task, it's a fundamentally different task.
But human in the loop changes, so like, if human in the loop was scoring 20,000 patients and making decisions without you touching it, how do you get in front of 20,000 decisions that are being made? So it's like, I think you really have to sit down and figure out what is our role and what's the human in the loop. Because if we're talking about insight generation, I totally agree. I can be in front of every insight generation it creates. I cannot be in front of 20,000 scores that go out in terms of who should get a sample and who shouldn't, or, right? Like it. So I think you have to really define that, what is that human in the loop, and like what level of trust, what level of risk, like everything else.
And I feel like we'll continue to kind of distance ourselves in that way, and maybe that's what you're leaning into. I mean, Preeti, for you and the size of your organization, do you see as well, like maybe like extending the leash a bit, right, on like what it can do, what it has control over, and ultimately how your teams are using it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're on very different scales, and so it's that that is a scalability sort of question that we will sort of get to, but with such a small patient population, you sort of have the opposite effect, where everybody does have visibility to everything, and then that leads to more questions, right, and more scrutiny, and so the ability to, yes, calibrate risk tolerance, safety tolerance, signal tolerance is critical, but we have to be able to unpack the box right now, because I mean, we can count our patients in a week on our hands, right? And so there's a certain level of visibility that that is a bit of a sort of a deterrent for us right now. We have to really be able to explain everything, and so but with that, we'll be able to learn and sort of expand that to larger use cases.
I think taking that and like leaning into adoption of it, right? Like both of you have kind of acknowledged the dynamics within your teams and your organization. But from your perspective, what would be a non-negotiable requirement for success when you're embedding either the signal, the output of an AI, or the solution itself into your team's daily workflows? And across the organization, the business partners that you work with as well.
Yeah, look, I think we covered it a couple of times. The trust piece is huge, but the single piece is it has to be embedded. Like when I think of all the examples that we've gone through, if we have to take extra steps to like this report comes out or this other dashboard over here gives you an insight, then it's failed, right? Like it has to be part of a person's workflow, and they do have to understand the why. Like stop chasing the script, chase the signal, and this is why. Like you're trying to take action on 2 weeks ago, and I'm trying to get you to take action 2 weeks from now. And so to me, it's really that embeddedness.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the WIFM is what's in it for me is critical, and I think also being able to sort of show trust we've already talked about, right? But results, right? We need to be able to track and deliver to the organization, right? There is a clear sort of expectation, and so I need to be confident that there is a level of sort of ROI, efficiency, effectiveness with what we're doing before I can sort of really, set it into the wild. And so for us, it's, that comes with the WIFM, the trust, the traceability, the transparency, and we really have to see it end to end for us. So.
I think maybe kind of in closing, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. From your perspective, your team, your role at your organization, and maybe at industry at large, Dan, what's next with AI, market advantage, signal intelligence? Like, what do you see short term, maybe 12 months out from now? I know. But perspective, right?
I mean, look, the real answer is I don't fully know. I think the amount of scaling we've seen, I mean, even in the last 6 months is incredible. I think it's just, for me, it's unknown. It's just being truthful. I'm being very truthful here, like keeping an open mind to, I don't know, have all the answers, and like continue to experiment and figure out, even personally, like we've been chatting about this, like even jumping in and creating these things, trying to figure it out. The one thing I'm expecting is that everything that I thought I understood and that I thought would be the right solution, and people have heard me say this in the org that are here, is the things that we think are here, we're gonna kill in the next few months, because we are iterating at a speed we've never seen. Within GSK especially, like we have to iterate. So these solutions, we have to be like willing to almost like white label them and then say like the engine's coming off and the next engine's coming in. Yeah. That's the one thing I'm without a doubt expecting, that everything I thought was right is probably different.
Being open to change.
Absolutely, being open to change and being comfortable with not knowing. I'm actually very good about these things, like being very comfortable with the fact that I'm not going to fully know the next piece and we're going to have to experiment.
I love that. And Preeti, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with all the thoughts shared. I think the other thing, we were talking about this yesterday, is eventually insights as a function really won't exist, right? You won't need to come to someone or a team to get insights, right? It should be part of the function itself and available to everybody individually as part of a collective sort of company map, company insight, metadata, it should be available to everyone. And so I think long term, that's the future. And for some, that's very sort of scary and unknown. But I think if we are moving in that direction where we're really unlocking the insights for everyone.
I think it depends on how you look at it. So I've always said to my team, like the best individuals are the ones that you cannot discern from the brand team or from the medical team. Or I think the view, you could have that view, like an individual could take the view of like, oh my God, insights are gone. Like insights aren't needed. Insights are going to change. Like your role where you create an insight and you stop, and that was your cog, has to change. You have to start understanding the journey and taking part in figuring out the entire journey, right? So I think it'll change the way the folks that are willing to change with it and are good and are strategic, they'll change how they work. I think it'll just make them better, it'll make us better too.
Yeah, I would also say like industry is also rapidly evolving around us. So
yeah.
how we apply
we always
technology,
have, just faster.
You can't know all of healthcare in the same way I don't think you can know all of AI. But I mean, considering those dynamics, I think both are very valid points from different perspectives. And I think at this point, if it's okay with the panelists, we'll open up for some questions.